Ah, le problème, c'est qu'il faut baisser un tout petit peu pour qu'il chope pas la lumière.
Il faudrait
là
que tu aies l'écran. Ouais, mais là, tu verras pas ma tête.
Là, il a la lumière.
Non, mais là, il est en surexposition, tu peux pas dire.
Ouais.
Ça, c'est bien.
Il n'y a pas un truc sur la caméra que je peux faire.
Tu veux faire dans le coin, là? Mais c'est bien, c'est bien.
Non, je voudrais juste un peu de...
Sinon, on peut pas voir les slides des personnes en même temps.
Je pense que
c'est ce que je peux faire. Ouais, c'est pas mal là.
Workers are on demand.
C'est bon?
They're on demand.
Yes. But then they...
Switch off.
Okay, so a few more slides about the how to compute using non-constructive definitions for recursive functions. So I will quickly remind what is the optimal fixed point technique and explain the extension that I recently discovered for being able to compute using it. So the goal is to define recursive functions when they are non-trivial in terms of decreasing arguments, and also when they are partial, that is, that don't terminate on all inputs. And to do that without dependency type programming, because I think you understood by now that I don't like it so much. And the new thing is to also be able to do efficient code-by-value computation using the definitions. Yes?
Just to clarify, when you say code-by-value evaluation, you mean ML evaluation, or you mean the strong reduction
in COC, strong reduction inside of COC, so using the code-by-value or normalization. I precise code-by-value because it might blow up in memory if you use code-by-name strategy. But you will see that in a minute. So the possible approaches that you can have to describe a recursive function is to use structural recursion or some extension with program or with function. But that involves dependency type programming. You can pass an integer to a natural number to say how many steps of recursion you want to have, the definition and the reasoning. Or you can go for an adductive definition, but then it doesn't compute. Or the only other way that I know of describing the body of the recursive function is to describe the function as a functional, and then take the fixed point of it by some magic using epsilon.
You forgot about monadic encoding.
Monadic encoding. I qualify this as equivalent to field controlled. If you have a monad, maybe you can play it with co-inductive, but it's likely to be equivalent to have some token that you consume as you go. But okay, maybe I could make it explicit here. So the interest of having a functional is you can take the fixed point using epsilon, and also you can unfold it as many times as you like to compute. So this is what we're going to do.
Oh, so you compute using rewrite?
No, I will compute by doing a single rewrite in the beginning and then simplification. Here's an example. So it's a simple example. It's not a partial function. I wanted to make the example simple. It's just some function log that calls itself recursively on x divided by 2. And what you can do with the optimal fixed point combinator, which is called here, fixed fun, is you can say, give me the fixed point of that, wherever it's well defined, and outside of the domain, it will return the arbitrary value. So this is a magic. I don't want to enter all the details about this magic. There's an ITP paper about it. You can read if you want the details. What I want to describe is a mechanism by which we make this, we make reasoning and computation about this definition.
So wait, you just said that if you apply it on the domain where it terminates, it returns the value, expected value, and outside of the domain, it returns the arbitrary value?
And you did not specify which is the domain that you want in the definition. This is all the magic.
Okay.
And the fixed point is like, because there are many fixed points, so there's like one fixed point?
So a functional can have many fixed points on different domains. And the optimal fixed point tells you if on one particular input data, all the fixed point solutions agree, then you take this value,
okay.
Otherwise you take arbitrary.
Okay, right, okay, like that.
This is a one-sentence summary of the construction here. So this is epsilon, so this is not going to compute by itself. So what you can do to do some proofs about log is to first establish a fixed point equation, which you can use to unfold the body of log at one level down. So if you do rewrite fixed log and then unfold of log, you are going to see this body exactly, but applied to your particular argument x. And how do you prove this? You prove this using a contraction condition. So it goes like this. So this is a fixed point theorem, which says that if you can prove your function to be contractive, then it admits the fixed point, it satisfies the fixed point equation. What does contraction means? It means that you can prove two instances of the body of your function equal for two functions f1 and f2 for making recursive calls. And you know nothing about these functions apart from the fact that they provide equal results on smaller arguments than the current one. So the magic is encapsulated in the library. It's to show that this condition is sufficient to prove the existence of a unique fixed point.
And you're using Phoenix. You're using Phoenix?
Using Phoenix.
Functional
I don't think it's involved in this proof here. Because this proof can be extended to partial functions which only have equality on domains. So the proof itself doesn't use extensionality.
The conclusion is also an extensional equality. So it's not...
Yeah, I quantify x explicitly here.
Yeah, in the conclusion of the theorem as well.
We can make do without Phoenix.
This proof, I think.
I also work on this problem in 1998.
Yep.
You can make do without functional extension. You don't need it.
Okay.
So if you have functional extension, the proofs can be faster. You can also do the proofs without functional extension. Yep. It's a bit like the parametric scheme.
So concretely, how do I prove that the log functional satisfies the contraction condition? I have to prove this goal here. So I have two copies of my body, one with f1, one with f2, and I have this assumption about f1 and f2 being related for smaller arguments. To make progress is to unfold cases. So when x is less than 1, I have 0 equal to 0. That's easy. And otherwise, I have an equality to prove between f1 of something and f2 of the same thing. And the only way to prove this is to apply h and to discharge that div2x is less than x strictly when x is more than 1. So this was the example of how we obtain the fixed point equation that is here. Using rewrite, we can unfold once a definition, so we can make some inductive proofs to establish properties about log, but we still can't compute. So in order to compute, I realized that you can prove a generalized version of the fixed point equation that says that log of x is equal to the unfolding of the functional. So the nth unfolding is defined here. When n is equal to 0, you just call f of x, and otherwise you call the functional on the n-1 iterate on x. So one important thing in this definition is that it's suspended to the knowledge of x before you do the match. So it's only when you know the concrete argument that you will do the unfolding, because otherwise, if you put the lambda x after the match, then you have some issue with the definition unfolding too early. So now what can you do with this? Let's look at a concrete example. If I compute log of 8, I can rewrite it to be the nth iterate of the functional log. And if I use any value of n more than 3, then it's going to simplify by unfolding to 3. So I don't usually know what value of n to take. It depends on the recursion depth. But I can take max int.
Net, you mean?
In an abstract form. I just have to make sure that this PO2 predicate is well, yeah, okay. You have to be careful. It doesn't have to be net. You can do the same thing using any number representation that you like. And the point is that you can define this executable version of the log function that is going to iterate as many times as you like this function. And then this iterated fixed point equation tells you that log is equal to log exec. So this is stated using functional extensionality here. But when you have a partial function, typically you would quantify the argument and the domain. So let's just summarize.
Sorry,
yes?
Can you go back one step?
Yeah.
So what is log exec?
Log exec is here. It's the max int iterate of log.
At log, okay.
And at log, yes, this is the most important thing, is you ground the thing on the function itself, and that's the only reason why it works.
Yeah.
Is because you unfold n times, but then you call recursively the same function. And this is the main difference between just iterating n times the functional by passing it some value that returns an arbitrary value for all inputs, because then you don't have a fixed point equation that is true outside of the domain. And you can't prove all these nice equations that you have here. Because here you have an unconditional unfolding that works because you ground the thing on the fixed point already.
And when you run it in Coq, you pay the cost of iterating on this maximum. I mean, you have to construct the fuel argument.
So you have to construct the fuel argument, but you construct it once for all recursive call that you're going to compute, and then you like take the head argument. So yeah. So either you change from that to something else, or in practice, what I do is I take n is equal to 10,000. So 10,000 is constructed once in memory, and then any like recursive function evaluation will just traverse this term downwards, and you don't allocate anymore.
And if you use a more efficient representation, you have to build the result of n-1.
There are some efficient representation, number representation, where you have constant time decrement. This kind of Okazaki style numeric representation.
No, you just do an exponential iterator. You just double the number of iterations at every n.
Yeah.
So that's you only decrease by 1 for 2.
I don't think all your transitions are constant time, but amortized, it's good. It's a good complexity in amortized.
I did the same thing with ACC. Instead of having epsilon, you assume some relation with well founded. And then you build the fueler maxim using ACC. And then if you're in weak call by value, you do that lazily. You do the fuel computation lazily. You don't even expand POW2 once.
So what's interesting is
you could use a functional to do the same thing.
I see. So what's interesting is you want the fuel to be evaluated lazily, but you want the evaluation of your functional to be called by value style.
Yeah.
So you'd like each function to come with some hint on how it should be evaluated.
Or you could have kind of lazy hints.
Possibly.
Where the successor takes a function, and in weak call by value, the lambda will be a function, so it will not be evaluated until you need to.
You allocate more closures, but at least you get. It's only when you need them that you pay for it.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if it's more efficient in practice.
But
to be tested.
Just this open thinking. So if you allocate more closures, are you going to allocate them only once for every function? Or is it that every execution of a function will have a memory cost?
Yeah. I think in Matthew's approach, it's not going to be shared, right?
So maybe the non-lazy hints are still more efficient in some respects. You only want them to have a yardstick to cover. And then you can use them in a initial way.
You really need to be lazy. if you have an expansion.
I don't know.
At least allocating the fuel should be not too costly. Depends how much you want it, right?
So I think the only problem that you have.
What you don't want to do is expand the tree eagerly without evaluating. That would kill you.
I think you don't have any problem as long as when you're working on some like concrete data of some size, because it's already allocated, so you can afford to allocate the same size. The only problem you can have is if you have a purely computational function that computes some very very deeply to produce some number. But even then, I mean, your output is likely to be allocated somehow. So the only problem is if you have neither the input or the output of your function is big of n in size, and you have big of n recursion depths, then that's the only case where you're going to have some overhead in terms of significant overhead in terms of allocation if you use some linear representation of the fuel.
Okay.
But then in those cases, you can go for just an exponential representation, and then you're good.
The problem is then you start to have to be competent. And you may go wrong.
I understand.
Yeah, in Arias, they have this funny bug with the strategy where they use the ACK unfolding stuff trick, and they run into the kernel just explodes because they rely on conversion. And
where?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Well, that's not in Arias. That in STDPP, they define a function by well-founded recursion. And in order for this to compute, they use the standard eta expansion stuff, and they use something like 2 to the power of 32 or something depth, and they have to manually craft the strategy to use the strategy command so that it actually works in the kernel. Otherwise, you get a stack overflow because it tries to convert to convert two things. And the strategy used by the kernel is not the right one because it unfolds and then it just goes into
so it's a stack overflow in what, in the conversion?
In the conversion, yeah. And it works because they use a strategy, but the checker, they have a problem that the checker doesn't pass through that because the checker doesn't implement the strategy command.
We should talk about the checker.
Yes.
And I didn't show the detail, but the same idea is applied to partial functions. So you can add a quantification over a specific domain in all of that work. The question is, what is your exec function computing if you call it outside of an input in the domain? So you have to imagine that the functional is going to unfold. And if it's outside of the domain, it's likely because you have an infinite loop in your code, or you have an infinite recursion. So in that case, you're going to unfold up to the depths of the fuel and then be stuck with the fixed point call. And if you have a big fuel, then it's going to blow up either the stack or the memory, depending on which parameters of your system you have. So the short answer is you're not supposed to do this. You're not supposed to call the executable version outside of the domain. But if you do, then yeah, it can crash in harmful ways. I'd just like to raise attention on this particularly nasty fixed point definition. In call by value, it diverges. You get stack overflow immediately. This is a valid code definition. It's provably equal to 0 everywhere, but it stack overflows when you evaluate it. Again, I think that you're just not supposed to write this kind of definition, and it's unlikely you write it by accident. But so this is a problem that already exists in Coq, and there's the same problem with the optimal fixed point. It doesn't spot that there's an issue.
But my life on not occurring.
Yeah, no, okay. I'll take that back, Charlie.
It's fairly tempting to do some basic computation with the arguments and then test for whether you're in the base case or not.
Yeah, and it's possible also to write this kind of definition by incorrect copy-paste. So.
But is it a big problem in practice?
You're not going to be able to make the proof that you're like about this definition, so it doesn't matter so much. Okay. Yeah, I have just some future work, the contraction condition, the same style as what Mathieu has been doing for the to extract the proof obligation to avoid traversing the term manually following its structure. There is something not nice in the library is that I have fixed point equation for every arity. I have tried to do some arity generic programming, but it was just beyond the what I was able to
at least don't you. I hope you don't use a Python script to generate them.
No. I just go from 1 to 3, and then I say the user has to package his arguments into a single one if he wants to go from.
So the equations has both these two things. And for the arity genericity, I use sigmas. I use automatic packing.
Yeah.
You could probably branch this, this the same machine.
Right. So I this is well. If we want to advertise for this feature. Okay, some future work. Just to mention so I've used this this trick to in the CFML project. So in CFML, application of imperative code. So I used to have a camel code that takes some camel source code and produce some coq axioms describing the source code. And I was able to remove this external generator and make the computation of the fixed point, the computation of the characteristic formula of the code, all of inside coq, by using this trick of computing inside coq using optimal fixed point, because it's a non-trivial recursive call, or you have to make a substitution in your code before you make the recursive calls. So the size doesn't increase, but it's not structural.
If I understand well, you actually don't, so you use epsilon as some kind of trick not to have to write things properly, but once you've got the result of your computation, you don't really care anymore, right? Because you just want to evaluate in your case, I mean, in that precise case,
that's precise, yes,
you don't care about the user, you just care about the actual one application of the fixed point on something. You don't
I also have a proof, a soundness proof.
Yes, but you could
the
have
result is correct. So in this reasoning, I do all my reasoning without the fuel being.
Yeah, right. But you could specialize, assuming you have some kind of oracle. You can write things in the epsilon style. Don't worry about suffering for the proof and everything, and get coq to output something that doesn't contain the use to epsilon in that case or something like that. I mean.
So I want to do two things with my fixed point. I want to compute concretely the characteristic formula of some code, and I want to reason about this generator to prove it soundless once and for all.
Yes, but once you've applied it to something, to a particular argument, you ditch the proof, and you only want to get the soundness proof for one.
For this
instance.
argument, yes. Okay. Okay, I'm not sure I get the question, but I can show you the details and maybe.
It feels like the main thing you're gaining is that this works for fixed points that are partial. If you have a total fixed point and you can figure out the fuel in a reasonable way, then you're basically writing the same thing, because the fuel argument is hidden, and the only place you need to expose it is when you prove your expansion lemma. So as long as things are total, you're pretty
well,
good.
the case of the characteristic formula generator, it is a total function, but to prove its soundness, I need the unfolding lemma, and I like the unfolding lemma to not involve any value of n.
Well,
because the soundness proof that is generic, it doesn't know about the depths of the term that you should need. I guess you could do...
what you do is you generalize the depth when you prove the expansion lemma. But otherwise, all existing instances have a specific depth that's hidden in a...
I see. You could compute the depths of the syntax tree on which you call the function, and then do a proof by induction over that depths. That will prove the soundness.
Yeah,
for this specific case.
So,
but it's really when you have partial function that the gain is.
Right. So,
important,
for say the first case I would do this for the GCD, where that's probably the first place where we you just have the because the thing is total, you just have the expansion lemma, and this is the only place where you ever see that there's a fuel being used.
You still have to choose a fuel value.
Well, of course, for the PCV is fairly obvious. You just take one of the
Yeah, but in some cases it's not obvious to know it.
Yeah.
If you have any question.
Yeah, I don't understand what you do for partial functions. Because I have a bootstrap problem there. You need to define the domain, you need to define the function, and the function is proved terminating on the domain. But you also define the domain as the places where the function is terminating, as the way as an MOB does.
So in the partial function case, so there's a function here that terminates only for even numbers or odd numbers. And you take the fixed point without specifying the domain. And then when you state the fixed point equation, then you say on which domain you want to prove it. Proof obligations over that domain.
So this is your choice. It's not given to you from the definition.
You choose on which domain you want to prove termination.
Yeah.
And you can have different proofs on different domains if you like.
Yeah.
It's not hardwired in the definition.
I mean, you could write it the other way around, having one generic lemma that says, oh, the expansion is valid on the canonical domain. And then the lemma you prove is that the canonical domain for this fixed point is equal to not even or contains not even or.
Yeah, you want some inclusion, right? But
this was basically what Anabobi was doing, defining the canonical domain as the place where that's inductively obtained from an analysis.
Some inductive definition. Yeah. Here you choose the domain on which you want to prove something, and you don't have to prove anything outside of the domain.
Okay.
And you specify the domain after the fixed point construction. I think in Bove's approach, it was canonically defined, but the domain was used in the construction of the fixed point.
Yeah,
it's a minor difference. But
it's canonically defined once you know the code you want to define, but the function exists after the domain.
This is a bit of a hijacking. So if you showed it, what is this proof environment?
This one?
I was just keeping the same thing in mind.
But it seems to recognize part of
some syntax highlighting.
But it doesn't know by the modules.
Yeah, just syntax highlighting. Okay.
I was wondering the same. You're not alone.
I have two other slides I wanted to discuss with you.
It's not a true environment.
There's the last line I want to.
Last line?
Last line.
Ah, yes. So there is a project. Some of you might know I worked on something called Pretty Big Step that was motivated by giving a formal semantics to JavaScript. It's avoiding the duplication problems that you have when you have big step definitions, when you have to say that either the first argument evaluates or may crash, or the first argument evaluates correctly and the second one crashes. The first has the second argument evaluate and the third one crashes. And you keep repeating all the premises from the beginning. So Pretty Big Step avoid this by forcing each rule to have only one premise and one continuation premise, and go through intermediate forms to ensure that you don't have duplication in the rules. And one idea is to apply this for taking some recursive definition and generating automatically some corresponding inductive definition, but linear in size of the function. So the naive thing to do to translate a function into an inductive definition is to take all the passes from the entry point to the leaves, but then you are duplicating some information along the path that you used to reach the leaves. And the way to avoid this duplication is by having some kind of intermediate checkpoints. So you make step between the root and the force checkpoint, like every branching point. And then you reach the leaves like this, and then the number of transitions you have is linear in the size of the curve.
So that means you'll have several inductive definitions?
You have just one inductive definition, but it's not a relation between input and output. It's a relation between intermediate forms and outputs. And one particular intermediate form is the entry point for your argument. But then you can have other intermediate forms. which correspond to essentially your stack state at the place you.
So the reference to know this is one of the papers you published around JavaScript?
No, there's a pretty big step ESOP paper, but it doesn't describe what I just said, the connection with functions. So this is something I want to work on. It's not described yet.
The graph generated by questions is very similar, but it's mutual. When you add a pattern or you do a case distinction or a new thing, you generate a new inductive which has one more argument. Sounds like it's close to intermediate forms.
Maybe we should just sit down and look at one example, and then it will be clear.
But you're saying it's going to be linear in the side of the function.
The point is to avoid duplication. So if you make any if statement or pattern matching, it will appear exactly in one of the inductive rules. So perhaps it's similar. And
you're saying function does the same?
No, I'm saying that function does construction of an inductive definition, but it has a duplication problem. So I spoke with Pierre and he said that would be great to do. Voilà, j'ai sur un autre sujet, I have
Schedule hijacking.
Just two. No, you agreed on this. You agreed on this.
But,
I have no studies.
It's your fault, Maxime, that you are not very sharp on the schedule. I come from Strasbourg only once in a while.
Yeah, every 3 years I come here and then I get depressed. I don't come for the next 2 years.
You get what?
Depressed. Font.
Chicken pictures.
Yeah. Okay, so I just want to give just a few hints on how we can save a lot of time to practical Coq users. So imagine you have a file foo that requires bar. Standard compilation is you take foo.vo, compiles from foo, requires dependencies on bar. So you have to compile all of the proofs in bar before you can start the proofs in foo. There exists some VIO file that you can use, but there's some problem is that they duplicate the state, and so the files are huge, and it takes a lot of time to produce them and to replay them, and it doesn't scale so well. So I've stopped using the VIO files for that reason, and I'd like to to advertise for a simpler strategy. In terms of universe, but I can compute universe using this standard method at night, and during the day use some more efficient system. It's very simple. You just replace all the proofs by admitted, proof QED, replaced by proof admitted immediately. So now you produce from the V files patched in that way with admitted, you produce a VOI file, essentially a compiled interface, which you can use for compiling the dependencies. So I have tested this in the past, a few years ago, using a manual script. So it works in practice. I would just like Coxy to do this, to have support for this strategy.
I think there is an easy workaround to the size of a VIO that is essentially giving you this feature. You just sync the state, and it will fail whenever you try to force the future.
But before diving into that, is it true that the only problem with the existing infrastructure is the size of files? Or are there other? Why do you need something else than VIO file existing?
I think the VIO are trying to package the possibility to do some evaluation and this information that is not needed.
But what is your problem when you try to use VIO files?
Oh, the VIO file, they take almost as long as the VIO files to produce.
Yeah. So it's time.
I only save like 30%, and it consumes a gigabyte of memory.
Yeah.
So it's time and space. Or
Time and
I'm just
space.
asking because
let's just say the approach needs some refinement. This is still needs some refinement.
But I want to understand if we patch the things so that with an option, these tasks, the closure, what thing, this delayed thing that has not been done yet but can be done later, we could just drop it. Okay. Don't we get exactly what you propose?
I think so.
This is a possible implementation of the feature I'm asking for. I'm just talking about the user experience here.
But I'm curious that you actually don't see that admitted is quicker than that they're replacing all the QEDs by admitted.
No, admitted. I removed the proof.
Yeah, you remove the proof, but I'm surprised that it's okay. So the VIO size, it's a design problem. It's like it won't be fixed easily. But the fact that the speed of compilation is way more important with the replacing everything with admitted than VIO.
If you look at my lib list file, it takes 2 seconds to compile, maybe 3, and every lemma is like a trivial proof.
And the surprise,
so if you remove them, you don't gain.
Something that is generating 10 gigabytes of crap going to be fast.
At least you need to write it on disks. So.
Okay, so if that is the main throttle, then probably just getting rid of the.
So yeah,
there is something that can break here. It works for you because the way you use sections, but if you start to have a hypothesis in your section, then this doesn't work.
So there is a proof using, which is meant for this, to my understanding. And if users don't respect that, I mean, therefore, they can always annotate the QED by saying, this is a QED that I don't want to be replaced by admitted, if they really want. Or maybe have some mechanism for not using this. But for all users that don't use sections heavily, then they...
What will your mechanism do if there is no proof? What does
it will just, like I said, replaced by admitted. And then it's going to fail.
The type may change.
No, the compilation will fail.
Yes.
Yeah, likely it's going to.
Depends how you use the type.
So either you complete the proof using.
Yeah, but we cannot do. I mean, we cannot do that.
If you don't want that, then you just don't use this compilation option. Or you have locally some mechanism for letting the content of the sections to be inside.
I'm pretty sure we can piggyback on VIO implementation to that in 10 lines of code, like just dropping the state in. It's not.
No, I disagree. I strongly disagree.
Why?
Because the whole system is just if what we want to do is the whole structure needs a deeper refactoring. Huh? Yes, I happen to know. Finally, I understood him, but that was it to Sophia. It took me 2 years to understand it. Yeah. So finally, I understood, and I strongly disagree with the implementation. So we could do a technical session, but I think patching the current solution is not enough.
But I'm pretty sure, in 10 lines of code, I can solve this problem.
Go ahead.
I'm happy. Okay. Let's just finish on the interface.
If we all agree that the only problem is the size.
Let's just finish the interface. So
okay.
This is for the VOI.
But if the now, time, we should benchmark it.
Yeah. Okay. So once you have a VOI, there is one feature that will be useful in the IDE is to be able to say, okay, state by rebuilding the dependencies so that I can reach my current state in an updated way.
An idea is not a build system.
No, I'm not asking for a build system. I'm just saying I want my IDE to be able to make on some target. And what will that target be? The target that I want is foo.require, which is a target for compiling everything that foo depends on, but not foo itself. Okay?
Yeah.
I want to compile all the dependencies of foo, but not foo. And this allows me to go back to the current point in the IDE.
It's like an XY problem.
Makes sense? Yeah, it totally makes sense to me. This is something I would like to support. I totally agree. And yes, of course, the current infrastructure is totally inadequate to having Isabel is doing, in Isabel you load whole projects into the IDE, and they are built incrementally. If there is an incremental support for code, but it's based on the slicing of programs, the syntactic things is for there. So in my opinion, at least I think it makes a lot of sense, both things, and but it needs a bit of work with it, when they will get there.
So this is zero cost.
The
main command to the IDE.
I think the document model, in my opinion, is not well suited to having some different support you would like to have on holes. For instance, I don't like the way holes are implemented. So I think I would rather, because basically this is stuff if I understood correctly is in a hole. Okay, as I went in a hole. So I think we want to modify the basic representation of holes into the document before. But then
you're asking for something big. I'm asking for something tiny. So.
That is easy to implement.
There are some consequences that you may not foresee. So, for instance, a third of the Windows build script is about compiling and shipping our own version of make, because you say you just call make. Okay, so but where is make?
No, but
where is make? Where is it?
There's already in CockID a make command.
Yeah, it doesn't work. It doesn't work on Windows. It doesn't work on Windows.
It doesn't work. It doesn't have to work. Let's just leave it this way. I just want it to work on my machine.
No,
Look at your machine. The machine is as Windows.
No, it's not a Windows.
So,
it's Ubuntu. It's
He
Ubuntu.
stopped him to level.
okay. I submit to.
Okay, let's not short.
No,
Let me
but
just
this is not
finish.
the problem.
Yeah.
I'm saying just that.
I understand.
Even the simple solution.
The problem is you're all trying to make the world perfect. I just want it to be epsilon better than
No,
that.
but we want to implement stuff that has a chance of working properly.
I think that the best way for that is to remove the option compile buffer. But yeah.
And I'm just saying it's not so easy, honestly.
What's the
Require is
solution?
not harder than having
Okay,
the
let's-
rest of the Makefile work. On Windows or anywhere. It's the
Yeah,
same.
no,
What, I don't understand. Why is not this message? I don't understand.
you implement the make command in OKD.
No, this is not a make command. Like a document model, it doesn't make sense to have a document model so that the prover, the prover is going to do some proof scheduling, some proof checking scheduling, of course, needs a document of the model to see what parts are missing to be checked. And obviously, it doesn't make sense that in fact, that really doesn't have that notion. It's a bit extended now to have a notion of a single document. Coq should be aware itself. Coq should be aware that there are many documents involved.
But this is
I
an
fully agree,
ambitious
but I don't
project.
see why you say.
Because this is you don't make, you just load the whole project,
But that's
and
my
then Coq's VO files are just a cache. VO files are just
I
a cache
agree.
that Coq can find enough, and of course some parts can be invalidated. So you don't need to implement anything like make. What is make? There's no
No, I
make.
agree. That's why it was mentioned in this technical solution. That's why I'm saying.
So-
I don't think it's a good.
No, okay, well, the
This
technical
is
solution
another discussion that we
Yeah,
finish. Let me just finish and then somebody else can speak.
You
So-
might want to load and compile plugins.
Yeah, sure. Of course, you may need to handle some. Maybe in this model, in fact, the plugins have to be declared in a kind of dependency of the project. Okay, there is as Enrico has been demanding for many times, like to have a special header for the projects. So the annotations to speed up parsing. Okay, that's okay. Sorry.
Never mind. So when you're in this system where you have VOI files, it makes sense once you have the compile interface to compile the proofs independently. And so the way it was set up in the makefile that I used a couple of years ago was to have some kind of target, like say VOK, to say that the .v is okay, which is depending on the source code of the file, the foo, and depending only on the VOI of the dependencies. So this allows you to check in parallel all the files that you have, that they all compile. And then at night, you can check that your universes are correct by using consi, but during the day, it goes fast like this. So it's a very, I believe, minor changes. I mean, I've explained that to some of you like 5 years ago already. If there are easy way to implement it, I will be happy to participate in implementing and testing this. But
There's only one that needs to be made in Coq is the first one. The other are just make file.
No,
So there are some some side effects to this. So VOI, it's likely like that you want type in type to be automatically activated because universe is not going to be consistent anyway. So maybe you can have this as well. And then you want some option here when you compile VOK to say whether you want to load VOI or whether you want to load VO files. Sometimes you want to be able to still load the VO files if they exist, as opposed to loading the interfaces.
Yeah, there is.
No,
this.
loading most recent is terrible.
Yeah.
This is terrible. First, there shouldn't be
It
VO
makes
files.
make file like very
There should be when this in this there's like but for instance, I think one very strange thing is to have different kind of files. Even some other things that, but I don't see the reason VO files couldn't be like support a partial checking. Why do we need two kind of different files? This is already a kind of warning. Yeah, this is already very suspicious.
You would like to have the same. Come on, there's CMX and CMO and CMI, and they all make sense.
It's very suspicious in the context of Coq. I don't understand why we cannot have like just a single VO file that has support for maybe some proofs not evaluated yet.
Yeah, they're more or less partial versions of the same file.
Yeah, like a cache. I don't know. Because then you have the problem when you have several files, you got the problem of recency and selecting which file and like it's not the same. The problem is not the same. Like C++, when you pre-compile headers, it's a bit different though. Mais du coup, ça va les méthodes maintenant. Ok.
Ah non.
Ah. Ouais, mais c'est très facile.
Oui, bah vas-y.
Donne-moi une minute là. Ouais, you can load the put the page down si tu veux.
Ah, il n'y a pas de slide.
Il y a une slide seulement. Mais ok, mais comme ça. Ah, comme tu veux, ça va déranger, tu penses? Ok, j'espère.
You organize the meetup?
What the fuck? Okay, Théo, so you can start. You can start to explain to people.
Okay, so Emilio came to me, sent me an email before the summer to ask whether I thought it was a good idea to create a meetup in Paris for Coq users, and I said yes. And so he created it.
Well, so a meetup, maybe for people, discuss in the last working group a bit, but maybe you can explain for people who were not there what a meetup is.
Okay, a meetup is a meeting for people that share a common interest. And in programming languages, there are lots of meetups for people who are users of one particular programming language, and people meet regularly, have talks, drink beer, and eat pizza. Everyone is welcome. In general, it's you can have people from academia, people from the industry, hobbyists, people from the industry that would love to do that at work, but are not paid to do that, so do that at home.
Wow. So this is the member, so yes.
It was really impressive because when Emilio created the web page, like 60 people joined in a few days. So
yeah, this is special. So Meetup, as we mentioned, is a service you have to pay. So I'm the organizer because I want to pay, and Théo too, but Théo has to be co-organizer because they took my credit card. In exchange of the money, you get a wide audience. And in fact, this is just with one announcement, because then when we announced the second meetup, then you have to see the actual attendance. But I think it's optimistic to say to expect around 30, 40 people to this meetup, to the first meetup. And yeah, but you can see it's public. You can see the people here. There are many people which are familiar to you. Many people they have no clue, from people who know nothing about Coq and want to learn. So this is really a wide audience. This is what you pay. A meetup is. Did
you say you paid on your personal money?
Yes. What can I do? If not, nothing happens. But anyways, yeah. I mean, I want to find ways. How can this pay? And the only offer I got is for another person. I will pay with my personal money. So it's okay. I can pay. I got a super discount, so it was cheap. 6 months for 20 euros. So it was not a lot.
6 months for 20 euros.
So it was not a lot. 6 months for 20 euros. Anyways, but yeah, no, I mean, I think we need to do things sometimes, and we cannot be holded by this stuff. It's not like the plugin developers. If not, nothing happens. So okay, so but to be brief, because I think it's way more important what Théo has to say. So was to present a bit, and okay, I know this is the term. We need help with suggestions for people willing to host the first meetup. I think it will make sense that it's hosted maybe at the place Coq was created, kind of, or at the main center. So maybe meetups, for instance, for Camel sometimes happen in universities. Last one was in Facebook, and the food was very good. The drink was very good. It was more drink than food, so it didn't work too well for us.
It was not really meetup-like because there was champagne instead.
Champagne and this stuff. Théo was talking to the Facebook people to try to host a Coq meetup.
Yeah, but
Facebook.
they said no.
They said no. Fucking Facebook. Sorry, no. Coq is full Facebook. No, I know you are. I know your artificial intelligence is recording everything we say. So Facebook, we want to do the Coq meetup at Facebook offices with this champagne, the same champagne as a Camel or better. But okay. Anyway, so location suggestions. Personally, I think it will be good to have this in a university, obviously, like in Paris or some place like actually. a kind of bit of a nominate to Coq that the first meetup is the place where Coq was developed. Speakers also, I have some ideas, of course, take into account the general audience. I think some developer in the first meetup should also speak. So
it would be good to have both developers and
users. So we are also talking to people, and of course, I think also like a developer should open the meetup, obviously. Nice to Coq academic background. And then, of course, something very important, if you have some suggestion, is to tell us who is using Coq in the industry near Paris. We know a few users, but I know you know way more. So it will be good to get in touch because honestly, the first meetup should happen in the university, but it will be cool if the second happen at some office of some like these hybrid research agencies that there are sometimes in France. They are using Coq a lot. And then also we need funding and sponsors, and this is not a lot because it's usually for the food and snack. So this is usually easy to get, but okay, it's cool also if people have some idea how to do that. Well, no, this is very open because this is people who do the meetup. So okay.
How long in advance is the date typically announced?
1 or 2 months.
Okay.
Yeah, so
not like today.
No.
So we did ask Maxime took the initiative to ask to the Coq consortium and Arias to see if we could have some support. I think we did.
This was the problem. I was waiting to see if we could get through in our channel.
So I received an answer from David Marjorie, and I thought it was from a question that you had asked. But maybe I did ask the question, and I forgot to forward it to you because I thought David had doing it. This is where you're mad at me. But we did ask the Arias, and they say that in principle they agree to support this kind of activity.
Interesting.
So
this will be very good. And in fact, we can put a typical thing in the meetup.
I will have to look in my mail to forward it to both you and Maxime.
So something
we
that
can.
What?
Then I'm a bit confused. You said we could not.
I said no. It's not the right time to talk about it. Let's
no worries about that. No worries.
We haven't said anything to Emilio yet. So until now, Emilio has paid it from his pocket money.
It's okay because actually, as I was logging so many times to the meetup page, finally they thought like, this asshole doesn't want to register, so they make me this big discount. Now it's 80%. So it was very good. So yeah, by the way, this is very important. So something very important, for instance, if INRI is going to sponsor, we will put the official sponsorship logo, of course, and a lot of maybe I think it's easy once we announce to get to 100 participants, and then of course this is say the Coq Meetup is sponsored by INRI. So yes, we're selling publicity space there. Yeah, of course it's just a very small sponsorship, like a few euros.
But talk about who is really sponsoring.
Well, I mean, but I don't know if it's important for you, but yes, usually it's typical to say that this meetup is supported by.
But it may mean two things. It may mean the support in terms of funding food for a meeting, or I thought we were talking about the meetup.
Meetup fee is very low. Okay,
yeah.
It's very low. Okay, so yes, of course.
It's very
low. We could just put €1 each, and then we will have 1 year. Okay, funded. So this is.
We put a box at the entrance of the room to say.
I don't expect
funding.
Honestly, in 6 months we can get like money to pay the meetup on some random thing. Then we are useless as money getters. Okay, we'll figure out. Now, I was just in fact my idea when I asked you was to see what possibilities are. For instance, will be cool like will be cool like some people, some industries, and some people. So for instance, people as CEA, I don't know. In particular, I think this is the most important thing because academia we got it well covered. And academia, we want it well covered, and many people, and with the Camel people, they may try to help a bit, I think, or do suggestions, people with experience. They have been talking to other people. So it's more important to try to get here, like these institutions with some contact and people using Coq, and they are a bit more like industrial or whatever, or even thin, to try to be there, because this is the whole point of this exercise. And well, that's it. I think we want to advance more. I think at the beginning of January we will talk a bit. Also, Théo is busy enough, so I will try to be leading here because Théo with his other that is in Coq has been pretty busy. But of course, we will talk between us and see what we can do.
One in February. Or?
The idea will be the February, March. Yeah. So I think just after the holidays we'll talk and we'll try to contact people more seriously and try to do the first place. and then discuss. For instance, we didn't discuss still yet the place. I came with the idea to say today maybe it would be good to try to organize first obviously in the place at your place. Okay, at your place, Mathieu, that you host the first meetup. If it's possible, I think this will be a kind of logical thing, and also like a developer is one of the speakers, right? And we can see who, and then if 2 speakers, it will be okay, or maybe 2 or 3 speakers, and then this is a Meetup. So always the first one is a bit more, yeah. And then the good thing of Meetup is once we announce, so Meetup is very based on notifications. So once we announce the first Meetup, even if the date is not fixed, we say, oh, these are going to be the speakers and the place, and then this starts sending mails, not only to the people who have registered, but to the people who have not joined and could be interested. Yeah. So this is again, you get like but it's important not to be very annoying, because otherwise people, so then again, this is another like recruiting opportunity. Then all the people who meet up things that are interested based on the tags. Yeah, I would say, so this is tags ID randomly, but for instance, these are the tags we have. So this is actually how Meetup chooses who to notify. Here they are. So we have open source. So this means all the people in there interested in open source will get a notification. Software development, programming languages, Haskell, Answer programming, logic, deep specification, code, assistance.
Yeah, programming.
OCaml programming, software security, mathematics, constructive logic, dependent type programming, and proof theory.
Deep specification.
Yeah, deep specification, and we cannot add more tags. It's not a limit, but if you have, of course, if you have some suggestion.
I think he did, yes.
Okay, right. So
but it's tags that exist.
They were
I mean, they were already existing.
Yeah, for instance, deep specification. There is a deep specification meetup in the Bay Area.
In the Bay Area.
And people are learning code by following Software Foundation.
By the way, the first member was Paul from Boston.
Interesting.
It was very funny to see the meeting there in Paris. Thank you, Paul. So, so the tags really are sending the. I think they should send the mail to the people interested in it.
By the way, the COC meetup is also a good opportunity for COC developers to meet learners, beginners, because usually in workshops like COC-PL, the COC workshop, etc., we meet with users, but experimented users, and it's interesting to have their feedback, but having the feedback of beginners is also interesting, and it's not something that we are used to have, except on COC Club, but
students.
And students, yes, students is.
But you have the same relationship with a student that with some beginner. Subordination. Whatever.
So, well, you know, Théo and I, any of us is okay to any comment, question, suggestion. People, Hugo. The more senior people, Hugo, George, Yves, we need speakers. So, okay, we can, after the holidays, it's always when you are full of food, you are more optimistic, so we can discuss.
Yeah, and I think this time we won't have any technical problems.
Well, don't say it too loud.
Yeah.
Don't say it.
Okay, so yeah, as I said this morning, this talk is has links with the talk that Emilio gave, but I'll explain this more precisely during the talk, or you will see. Some context first. So I'm not going to take too long on this, but as I was saying this morning, the historical distribution channel for COC packages was COC contribs. And COC contribs were submitted by users and distributed by the development team. And distributed just meant there is a tarball that you can download. It's not going to be easy to install, but at least you can get them. So that was the way it used to be. And that was already interesting. And the packages were maintained by the development team. And then came OPAM. And OPAM allows to easier distribution
when the maintainers of a package are not the code development team, for instance, SS Reflect and Mat component was maintained by some other team, and there are other examples of packages that were already being maintained by different people.
Let's see. So now I have a question. So in the old model, now this struck to me. So what happens? So there was like parallel maintenance in the old model. So there was the case like somebody was maintaining the package but active. Of course, for random packages.
That was the exception.
Yeah, I think that was more or less a mistake. There was the example of Concert SS Reflect.
Okay.
This was not done.
I can say quickly what
this was done for
what happened in practice. So, for instance, on Concert, typically the two versions would diverge during the one cycle.
Okay,
and
yeah.
they would resync in terms like a.
Okay, but that's what happened in the old model because I'm not familiar. Okay.
But the most important contributions were the ones that were donated to the code development team and then maintained by the code development team.
What do you mean the
most important in terms of fitting the definition of what a code contrib is.
Yeah, because now that you mentioned it's surprising, for instance, this mail I got on relational algebra. That person pointed to me to the code contrib version of relational algebra because it's like maintaining the there was a bit of confusion. I think some people took as the main page of Concert sometimes the code conflict.
We had this exact discussion
at
the time.
But these problems are now solved.
Yeah, just to refresh. Okay. Yeah.
So and another purpose of code contribs was for testing, compatibility testing, and that's also a reason why there was this duality. So to be done a posteriori with contribs because people committed in the trunk and then they just fixed the contribs to so that they would still compile. Now we mostly do testing with the continuous integration and with overlays so that we fix the package that we test before we integrate changes. And we are much more careful about changes, but anyways, that's not the point.
And it's not the same. And we decorrelated the package index from the CI.
And yes, yes, absolutely. And so this leaves us with the contribs that still exist, but whose status is very unclear. First of all, okay, so the contribs exist and are still maintained for the most part, mostly by Hugo. But there is no submission process anymore. There is a new package big names taken out of the standard library but did not join the contribs.
This is unrelated.
No, this is related to the fact that this point just shows that the status of contribs is unclear. If the contribs were still a thing, it would maybe be natural to put big names in it.
It would be in the code package index.
It is in the code package index.
I don't understand the link. I don't think there is.
I'm just saying.
It's a fact anyway. It's not part of the concept.
Yeah,
it's
unrelated.
Okay, well, forget about that point if it doesn't help you understand that slide. And this was a point, the last point was something that was discussed many times. Code contribs were never subjected to any kind of editorial work, which means that some people criticized heavily the fact that such or such package was in the code contribs because they thought that it meant something about the quality of the package, but it didn't. But this never happened because basically nobody really committed to doing this editorial work, and of course the development team couldn't do it alone. So this leads me to one important point, which is that we are in the current situation, we are letting code proofs die.
There is a logical contradiction in that sentence.
Yeah. So it means that Coq is making the logic inconsistent.
And there is a bit of emotional bias.
Sorry?
There's a bit of emotional bias.
Emotional bias?
Yeah, when you say they die, I mean, like, I would naturally feel like I have to do something.
So
I think that's inaccurate because you mean like they become compilable in newer versions.
Yeah, exactly. That would
But
be
we
more-
have Sigma packages these days, so it's easy to install Coq 8.3 and compatible proofs.
So
That's
speaks
true.
the guillotine.
Anyway,
fine. But when you say that a software library has died,
You don't say that.
you never say that.
It rots.
NetBSD,
Sorry?
NetBSD
It
is
rots.
dying. The track
It
was
rots. Okay, rots.
It rots.
Okay, it
It's a
rots.
zombie. It's different.
So software libraries rots. It's normal when there are no users, no one is interested in it more in them. They rot, and it's normal. It's part of the process. In case of proofs, it should be understood that it is different because if a proof has no user, it doesn't mean that the proof is useless.
You mean the proof or the code?
But that's the same for
Well,
software.
In the
yeah.
proof or the scripts.
Yeah.
But that's the same for software.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
I mean both.
never forget the team. There is no forgotten.
Then I don't
This
agree.
is completely wrong.
This is completely
Sorry,
wrong.
for paper proofs.
No, that's
You can
wrong.
say no, it's wrong. You can say the same thing for algorithm. Like software rots, algorithms don't, and Coq proofs rot,
And
Yeah, but
proofs
for
don't.
instance, but packages
proofs,
like
but not their implementation.
Yes, that's exactly what this is saying.
Yeah, fine, but you
I
yes.
understand your point. They're very picky. I
Okay.
understand your point.
Okay, so maybe you don't care about formal proofs. It looks like you don't when I hear you, but it's not because the algorithm or the mathematical proof doesn't rot that we should let the Coq proof do.
Are you begging the
Just say it's
question?
for the fact of life.
Sorry?
You say it's for the fact of life that scripts
Yeah.
rot.
That's a fact of
But
life.
you're,
Okay.
and then now you're saying they should.
Yeah, so they shouldn't.
So,
So we should do something about this. And Coq contrips was a way to do something about this because the proofs were maintained by the Coq development team. So I'm proposing a new approach to this question, and this is inspired by stuff that exists in other programming language community.
Which have a community which is 10 or 100 times bigger.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Let's hear the proposal first.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Make the proposal.
So the proposal is to create an umbrella organization that is called Coq Community, which will have among its tasks to maintain packages, various types of packages, either plugins, libraries, or proofs that are not necessarily libraries. For posterity, and so this would be a collaborative community effort. That means we stop saying the Coq development team should do everything. We should involve users. That's basically what I'm saying.
Oh, can you go back to the previous slide?
Yes.
So here
So-
I see big numbers.
Yeah.
And I'm a bit concerned.
Yes.
I would like to strongly emphasize that we never decided that we would stop maintaining big numbers.
I'm not saying. I'm not saying
This
this.
I don't understand.
This is misleading.
Yo, I don't understand why Big Nine is there.
Why is it there?
I don't understand
Why
why
is
Big
big
Nine is
numbers
there.
on this slide?
You don't understand software and sound.
You're scaring me. This was just an example. I even thought I would put math classes here, and
Interesting.
and then I thought maybe it's a bit too controversial to put math classes because it is maintained currently, but it is just barely maintained.
Big Numbers is fully maintained
no,
by
it's not
ourselves.
just barely maintained.
It's been implemented. Yeah, I think like actually when
Okay.
software has like an owner, like math classes has the authors, and the authors are taking care of this. It's a bit like strange to tell them to join this community.
It's like on their goodwill. I mean, if they want to.
Exactly. So that's why I didn't put it because I can't take the decision for the owner. So big nums being part of the package that the development team maintains, I thought that I had more legitimacy to include this in this example.
But so is this slide suggesting that the development team is not maintaining the big num package?
No, this slide is not suggesting this. This slide is suggesting that.
Read the title, and then you'll see where the confusion comes from.
Why do you think that community and development teams should be completely separate?
I didn't say that.
Well, it looks to me like you are saying.
No, you know what? I think first we should let finish. I think we're a bit confused because as you started with countries, we have in our mental model a bit of mix within the countries what you're proposing. So sometimes maybe that confuses us a bit. You know, like. Okay,
so forget about big nums. Okay, this was just an example, but. Honestly, I think the big num question is really, its status is really unclear, and we should talk about this also at some point. But if you want to separate this discussion from this one, that's fine. So, and importantly, this community would have a manifesto that explains its purpose, a shared contributing guide, a shared code of conduct. And so the goals of this community, this organization would be both long-term maintenance and consolidation of proof libraries, plugin, etc. That means that if the organization accepts to have a package, to maintain a package from now on, the maintainers of this package could decide to merge it with another. It's part of the process. It means that the package doesn't have to be kept in the exact state that it was at the beginning, except for compatibility fixes. It means that the community organization really owns the package if the owner of the package has passed it on. And the second point is to have a showcase of proof techniques, proof achievements, etc. And this is just to say, currently contribs or other package contains very nice stuff, but is not very well put forward. So this would be also a goal of this organization. And this would be a community effort. Basically, the principle would be that each package has a designated maintainer that is voluntary, but and decides what to merge in the package from any contributors, and who can be replaced if suddenly they are unresponsive for several weeks, or if they decide that they don't have the time anymore. But at any moment, a package would have a designated maintainer. So I already talked about the shared contributing guideline and code of conduct, and there would be also an editorial board, which would be formed of more prominent members of the community that have the experience to be able to evaluate the quality of the package. So whereas here, to be a maintainer, you would just need to be voluntary and have and being able to do it. For being in the editorial board, you wouldn't see the same people there. So here in the editorial board, we could see people like Yves, Georges, Arthur, Benjamin, and whoever is voluntary. Of course, I'm not saying your names to force you to participate, but it would be very nice. The editorial board would be in charge of evaluating the quality of package, basically giving stamps. This is of this level of quality, and we recommend this library as one that you can use and
copy.
Sorry?
And copy.
And copy, yes. And copy for your proofs, copy the style, etc. Yes. Absolutely.
And you could say, this is a nice result, but the methods that are used are outdated.
Yeah, absolutely. You could say also we are maintaining this package. Yeah, this would also serve the purpose of being able to say we are maintaining this package because it is very historically relevant, but don't use the methods that are in this package. It's recommended today. And this, okay, so this is my proposal, and it's linked to an initiative by Pierre Castéran, or at least I am making the connection, and he allowed me to make the connection. So he is starting a project, a new book, online book, too big to be an actual book, whose purpose is to describe interesting proofs and teach about interesting proof techniques. And the principle is that there is code that can come from an existing contrib or something that would be a new one, which would be and there is text, and there are cross references between the two. He has already several chapters ready about various subjects like Hydra battles or Hydra games.
It's not elimination, yeah.
And or ordinals, yes. So he's saying that he can't do all this on his own, and he would be very happy to have contributions for other people. He was talking to me and Hugo about the stuff that Pierre Letouze did on Fibonacci numbers, but he's not here. Or anyone could basically add a chapter to this book, and I think it would fit well with this code community organization, because obviously this must be collaborative. This project must be collaborative, not only to create new chapters and the associated package, but also to maintain them. And so if this idea doesn't look too bad to you, I think the plan now is to send an announcement that would be a call for contribution for people to join this organization and start this collaborative effort of maintenance, documentation, etc. I guess it would be, it should start with finding people to maintain packages first, and then later on, when this has started and is showing progress, start looking for the editorial board, because basically the people that will join the editorial boards are people that are already overloaded with responsibilities and won't want to join this effort if they don't see that it is actually something that is
because they are looking for a strong emotion.
They are looking not for
because you have to agree and put in a note in the package.
They are looking for stuff that is worth their time.
But that's one thing that disturbs me with what you are explaining is that there are some efforts that I would really like to promote, but these efforts are actually active now. They are not passed on to community.
Sorry.
Like concert or
yeah.
You know, if you take, I would take concert a few efforts from DeepSpec, the Coplico library, and things like that. These things are maintained and alive outside of these things, of this community effort, And these are the ones that I would suggest people to go and take as example for, because they are ambitious developments. Maybe the style is not always very stable or something like that.
Well, if the editorial board wants to do more work and also foundation on external packages, that would be up to
But I have the impression that
them. But
let's clarify the proposal first. So in this community managed setup, no externally active connection in your proposal. I understand.
The scope community umbrella organization would be for packages that are maintained under this umbrella organization. So CompCert or packages that already have active maintenance wouldn't necessarily want to join this this community. But sorry?
Yeah, but that would be, then it's too restrictive, I think. Yeah.
Sorry?
It's too restrictive to call it COC community.
No.
Include people that are actively doing COC.
No, it's not exclusive. Come on, you can both be in an organization in the.
I'm just saying the phrasing.
I named it COC community because there is an example from which I inspired, which is called Elm community, and which is maintaining packages in this way. So.
So you mean that big active Elm developments are not in the Elm community?
Exactly. Most big active developments are not in this organization, and this organization includes work that is less active, more stable. It doesn't mean that it is rotting. It's still developed, but it's not a brand new project. It's for packages that are already quite stable.
Do you know what's happening in the Haskell community? Because the package stuff, it's more than just
package
management, right?
This is closer to the package.
There is Stackage, which is closer to what Nix does, as far as I know. But so there is.
But these are just package management.
There is
no development.
Yeah, this is just package management issues. Do package managers include all the versions of the package, or only versions that are compatible between them?
So what you are explaining is somehow you have a big group of people who are very active in COC, and then on the fringe of this group, there would be a group of people who take charge of maintaining all these valuable things that are not under the specific responsibility of their initial developers anymore.
We also need another clarification. Does this have any impact on the CI infrastructure for current developers?
So about this, so I didn't put too much in the slides, but I was thinking that we need to consider how we are going to scale up the CI. For now, we are already reaching kind of the limit of what we can test at each pull request.
This is not even my question. Is our developers effectively going to have to maintain?
No, the idea that I was thinking. The idea I had for this would be that being part of COP community would also mean having to be maintained against the master branch, and each by the maintainer, with help of the development team when they need it. This is basically an agreement that we are you can come to talk to us on GitHub, etc. We are going to help you anyway. We are already doing this.
But if I make a pull request and you break stuff in this set of packages, I'm ready to talk, but I want my thing to be word anyway.
Yeah. So basically, the idea is that we in this set of packages, there would be maybe a few that would be selected as having to be fixed before any PR is merged, like we do already. So you don't want big name in this, but it could be, for instance, it could be math classes if it joins this, or it could be AAC tactics, I don't know. It could be a given package that doesn't exist yet, but is deemed interesting enough to be tested on each pull request. So this one you would have to maintain because you would have to provide an overlay to have your PR merge. But on the others, they would be fixed a posteriori. So this means that each of them would have their own CI infrastructure to test regularly against the latest code master. And when this breaks, they would be responsible of fixing the package. But it would be clear that we are welcoming their feedback if they think that the change that was needed was too much, if they think that we did some mistakes, if they think that they are not managing to fix it by themselves.
The example you took was N, which I don't know about. That means that the people who act as maintainers, that's a group that was created for the occasion, and they are not developers of the system.
Yeah, that's an informal group that includes some people that contribute from time to time to the main system, but mostly include library authors and several. I think, yeah, I'm pretty sure, in fact, that several of the people that are prominent member of this Elm community organization are also maintaining their own package on the side. That is, actively developed packages, even by the member of this organization, are not organization. And I think that we can inspire from this the way Elm packages are handled also for other reasons. The Elm package index is so much nicer than the COP package index in the way it is presented. There is an interesting thing about this. So, okay, so there is a big list of packages, but you see that here these are all grayed out. And in fact, these packages that are grayed out that have not been updated for the latest version. So they are still available, but they are put after. And this is a clear sign that not being compatible with the latest version means for a package to be dying. And this is a good way to encourage people to update quickly. And in fact, when a new version is released in this system, it's active libraries are updated very fast.
In the current package index, you cannot even search the list of packages for the current.
Yeah. So and this Elm community, they also deprecate packages. That is, once they have included a package in this organization, they do not commit to maintaining forever. Sometimes they just say they just decide, okay, we have been maintaining this package for a few years. A package by someone else has come up and it does the job much better. So it's time to let it die and encourage people to switch. So in that case, they just stop updating it and they let it die like that.
At the beginning, you were talking about top proofs dying.
Yes.
And now you are exactly saying that when there is something newer that is better, we should...
I'm making the distinction between a proof of an important mathematical landmark that is probably never going to have any users but should still be maintained, and a library that is meant to have users. And if a library stops being as interesting as it used to be, then it can make sense to deprecate it, to stop maintaining it. And possibly, if there are good parts that should be saved, it can be also a task to take what should be saved and move it to another library to consolidate stuff.
How would this compare with the Isabelle library of archive of proof?
Yeah, so
it seems very close.
Yeah, so this, so I didn't explicitly use the term COC archive, formal archive of formal COC proofs, but this is also a goal, very important to be able to present an archive of all the proofs that were developed, especially mathematical proofs that were developed with COC. When I say mathematical, I mean sometimes if you prove the very specific software, it might not be as interesting for everyone as a pure mathematical proof is. But
it's more related to your first sentence about proofs that don't die.
Yeah, that's it. So I don't know very well how this is done in the case of Isabelle, but I know that they have this huge library that is very useful even to do data mining and stuff. So
I think the difference is in Isabelle, they agree on the style in which to do proofs.
Yeah.
Like, what if you have like 5 different formalization of the same thing, one using dependent types, one in SS3flex style, one in TLC style, one in the standard library? You know, what do you do with these 4 proofs?
Well,
it's inherently unsatisfying to present 4 proofs and maintain 4 proofs on the same.
So to have a package in this organization, you have to have a voluntary maintainer. If people think that it's interesting enough so that 5 different people are voluntary to maintain them, then it can make sense to maintain them. But it can also make sense to just say, well, okay, we are going to maintain them for some time, but then we should merge them. We should.
You can't merge them. I mean, it's just different styles and different axioms, different fundamentals.
When there are different axioms, it may be more complicated, but different styles. It doesn't mean that a package can very well depend on different styles.
Is the plan to keep them all, and then will you just have 5 columns, style 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? And...
Yeah.
I think that you might want to do that.
You might want to do that. You might. It might depend on what exact example you.
What kind of message are you sending to people who are looking at COC?
Well, precisely.
Tell them all you have 5 different styles.
Exactly. But this is the reality, and the editorial board will be there to say, okay, this is not the recommended style. This you can have a look at this and these styles that are more standard and.
We agree there are 5 possible styles in which you can do COC proofs. You can go in one of the 5 columns. And
if the people in the editorial board think that the 5 styles are equivalent in terms of usefulness, then yes.
Sometimes we are not able to decide. We just want to avoid bickering between each other because
but that's
to have an emotional involvement.
So I think it's a very interesting proposal, but in my opinion, it is still a bit fuzzy. In particular, as we have pointed out, you didn't provide with examples. And I think you're mixing 3 models. My comment is you're mixing 3 models. You're missing the model of a package distribution.
Yes.
You're missing the model of a proof archive and the model of a showcase of proofs. Yeah. And in my opinion, the 3 models are totally conflicting. Because, for instance, a model of a package distribution, in fact, this is limited to, for instance, a code release and a set of created packages that are going to be released by Debian, right? And in Debian, for instance, many packages that were in Debian 5 years ago, they are not today. So packages die. Whereas you're proposing a model of an archive where packages don't die.
No, I'm not saying that. I said that we could let die a package when it was decided that it was.
You say conflicting things because then you say all the proof we should preserve them. So I think you're mixing the model of an archive with a very good cement by every. Can you please, guys? Can you?
Yeah, but we are way over the schedule, and honestly.
Yeah, but sorry, but we
Yeah,
are
but
talking.
let's
Go out
let
if
Emilio
you want,
finish his
okay.
point.
You can go out because we are trying to the speakers. If you want to talk, we have many other places there. Okay, so don't tell me that. Okay. Okay, thank you. So anyways, I think this is a bit different, the conflicting goals. So I think it's a very interesting idea. Maybe I will try to refine a bit more the proposal that I think is interesting. And because, for instance, I don't know, in the model of maintenance you propose, I think Orphaning, as I understood correctly, you say sometimes we never abandon things, but on the other hand, like packages, they are orphaned and removed if no new maintainer comes. And well, as we are over the schedule, yeah, well.
So if a package doesn't have a maintainer and no one is stepping up to maintain the package is removed. Yes,
but
well, not removed,
in
but
archive it's
not.
not. You see, but for instance, in an archive it's not.
Because there are people that are committing to always maintain. But
No,
I personally believe that the community is large enough to have a lot of very eager maintainers that are going to maintain a lot of interesting stuff, and of course there won't be a room for everything. But
well, and as we are late, I think you have still at least the model. It's my impression. Anyways, and I think also so which is good, but I think you look a bit ambitious on manpower. Okay. So I think I will try to make a deployment of the community, which I think is a very interesting idea. So I will refine more the model, and I will try to make a more progressive deployment in terms of manpower. Because right now, like you're proposing the editorial boards, this stuff, so I don't think there is the manpower to really do all this stuff. Apart from the sample, for instance, I think the samples which use big nams or math components, this stuff. So yeah, maybe this another thing apart from clarifying whether you're an archive or you're more of a package distribution or what you are, and then what is the lifetime of packages there. I will also try to think of a deployment plan, because if you're going to list like 100 packages and 10 maintainers show, my prediction is nobody will show up. It's the same way like we say, okay, we open things and nobody show up. So
I'm not going to list any package on my own. I'm first going to send a call for contributions and find maintainers.
Who will list them?
Sorry?
Oh, a call for contributions.
It's a collaborative effort. I said it all the time.
Yeah. Can we move on to it?
Yes.
Okay.
To leave at 5. So
we are good.
We have another talk?
Do we?
No?
We can.
I had a few
we can,
questions about LTAC. Maybe you can discuss my questions.
We can discuss.
I think
Call to contributors.
I think we should discuss again with about the impression you want to share in this discussion. I would like to share in this discussion too. I think it's a good idea, but the way we are going to proceed is not clear yet. So we have to decide how to proceed and maybe make another proposal in writing or in a role for the near future.
Yes.
There are nice ideas in what you are saying. We need to understand how to make everything in gear. Put everything in gear.
So it makes sense, as Théo said, to merge this effort a bit with this plugin developer program. I don't know even if they are not exactly the same, but they should be sisters or brothers or related. We'll talk a bit more. Maybe we can try to do another more concrete proposal on this working group. But that's good for me.
Yeah, just taking the log for LTAC 2, 2-minute brief recap on what we have now. So I'm not going to give any demo. You've already seen that.
Oh.
Thankfully. But now there is a notation system that allows you to write essentially things that are mostly, if you take any stupid script in LTAC, it will just go through, except for a very tiny grammar difference, which I'm not going to delve too much into, but it's mostly the same syntax. As soon as you want to have a bit more structure, like being able to refer to a name that has been bound statically, then you have to use a dedicated syntax. That's the main difference with LTAC1. Apart from that, the syntax is really the same. Like you only have to use quotations, and apart from that, you get for free types and blah 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 blah. So backwards compatibility is going to be immediate. Like you do have to do a few syntactic changes from here and there, but it's rather easy to do, hopefully, because you will be guided by the type system, which is going to tell you, hey, that one is not bound. Do something about it. So.
And dynamic semantics.
In dynamic semantics, that's well, it shouldn't change from the one of LTAC1. I mean, the reasonable fragment of LTAC1 is still working as before. You have to be a bit more dynamic from time to time. So, for instance, the good old clear bug where when you remove something and oh gosh, the carpet has been stepped under the rug like that. So there's no such problem now because you're forced by the type system to actually refer to that thing dynamically. So it solves a lot of problems at once. Pretty nice.
Match goal works.
Huh?
Match goal.
Match goal. There is a notation for match goal that works as before, which is typed. It's just so if you there is a limitation, which is that the user interface for errors is not very how would you say that, polished, because essentially this all the funny things that are LTAC specific are actually expanded at passing time into constructions, and you don't get to see those constructions. Okay, so you can see them when you print the resulting term, but the error messages the type errors typically are referring to the expanded form, so you get like a page-long error, type error saying, oh, this closure has some crazy type. Other one, okay, so it's not perfect, but at least.
Can't you do the same trick as ML4 and there? I don't know exactly how this works, but it seems to stack.
Yes, locations are preserved, but it doesn't mean that the type error, because you already have the same problem in ML when you have a type mismatch. You never know where to should you complain about the function? Should you, for instance, you have an application or a constructor, should you complain about the argument, blah, blah, blah. So when you use macros, it's not very clear whether the default strategy of yeah, exactly. So yes, that's not polished. But apart from that, you can write match goal with as before, it will work. I think that's about it. So
when I heard about LTAC2, I had lots of expectations. So I wrote some notes to ask, essentially, if I understand correctly, what is going to be possible or not possible. So essentially, I would like to discuss with you the difference between what can be done using LTAC2 and what cannot be done using LTAC2. What I believe should remain like hard-coded in the system, and what hopefully could be done with LTAC2. So maybe just read this list and tell me. Okay, so unification, occurrence selection, rewriting, probably inversion, coercion type classes, all of that will remain in the core system.
Obviously, you could probably write a unification engine in the LTAC2, but that would probably be madness. Yeah, but it's technically possible.
Rewriting is.
So in rewriting, I have auto rewrite in mind, and a very efficient version of auto rewrite probably needs to be hard coded. If you don't think so, then I'll be happy to.
So currently the subroutine of it, right?
Like the occurrence selection or
nets or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Currently the LTAC2 implementation uses a stupid interpreter that's nothing involved, but I have a midterm plan for targeting the OCaml backend and actually delinking the generated code directly so that you would probably be able to write stuff that's more efficient somehow. Yes.
So now going to the list of things that can be done in LTAC2. So is it possible that I can replace all the existing tactics by LTAC2 implementation?
Yes.
that I can generate top-level definitions.
There is no hook yet, but it's very easy to do.
Okay. So, for example, all the induction principles and projection functions that are generated.
That would be a very good stress test.
If I want to generate efficient comparison functions for first-order data types.
And
so metaprogramming is a target of LTAC.
Yes, yes. Okay. That's the main goal of LTAC.
Well, LTAC did not really allow you to generate.
Yeah, right. There is, but you generate terms. You couldn't just. There was no way to register it in the system. In tactic in terms.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so, I can do that.
Can we go once to this place for LTAC 2 and then once for LP?
Yes.
So that we see a bit the redundancy.
I don't know if I told you didn't know.
Are you aware about the other LTAC 2?
I'd rather not.
So yeah, I didn't know.
No, one proposal is enough to me. But I think this is an implementation detail as what is the other proposal. What I'm asking in terms of features is to be able to do this.
I'm not saying we should have one language to rule them all. There is no. So in the real world, people are gladly using Java, C++, whatever.
Not so gladly.
I'm actually in favor of people developing their own language. You have to understand what LTAC 2 is supposed to cover. So not as use case, but as the design principle. Design principles are backward compatibility with LTAC 1 and as close as possible to the actual, how would you say that? Not ML implementation, but very straightforward description in terms of the primitive you have.
I was just saying this because you mentioned the generation of schemes and things like that, and this is typically what Enrico is targeting for LTAC.
Yeah, but it's
I wanted to mention.
Pick one, or Meetup, for instance. I mean.
All meta
Yes.
Generating terms from terms.
Yes.
So yeah, sorry, didn't look to mention to LTAC yet. There is is there a phase separation between the meta programming layer and the proof service layer?
What do you mean? Like everything is dynamic because everything is dynamic in LTAC 1.
Yeah, but so, is it still mix the kind of like assistant in lean or this kind of mix like the meta programming layer, which is a term manipulation layer and term constructor layer? Is this still living into the same strata that the proof search layer that can fill and backtrack?
Yes, obviously.
Well, obviously, yeah. Well,
yes, because it's obvious because
there are two different languages.
It's obvious because as soon as you're building terms, you're building evars. As soon as you're building evars, you're tied to the actual global state of the proof engine. And
no, well, this is an implementation detail.
But you could do metaprogramming in a different way.
Without backtracking, yes, of course.
Yes, but you would still need some kind of evar, and you would be bound to reinvent the evar somehow.
Oh, well, but that's okay, yeah. But
okay, fine. I mean, you can reinvent the wheel atop of your favorite metaprogramming language if you want, but it's not going to help that much, I say.
I think there is a different phases, like seem to me the different phases, like metaprogramming phase or like a backtracking phase. A tracking phase is like try a few things and you have to listen to failure and backtracking and strategies.
So
building terms is just building terms.
So if you don't want backtrack, don't use backtrack. I'm not like in ML, you have FX if you don't.
Yeah, okay, so what are the semantics, for instance? Let me rephrase this way. What are the semantics of pattern matching a term in the meta language in LTAC 2?
In LTAC 2, that
it's like a backtracking failure there?
No. Well, it depends on the kind of pattern matching you have. There are various ways of pattern matching. You've got the one that is coming from constant matching.
Okay.
That one is like so you have all the basic building blocks. That is actually even the match goal is defined in terms of more primitive things that are not backtracking. You do just as we do if you look at the implementation in LTAC of match goal, it's actually a layer atop of the engine that you can re-implement perfectly in LTAC 2 by just reusing from scratch the fact that you have backtrack.
Yes, really.
But everything is the core things are not backtracking. You just
but your match is not backtracking. The answer is your match is really not backtracking. It's a complete match.
There's the match go, which is backtracking, but you can also decompose just like in
yeah, but this is the sewer. You told me, yeah.
There are various matches. Like it's not the same concept. Like there's pattern matching. You can pattern match on the constructor in a low level fashion. That is just you're given the inductive type, which is exactly
pattern matching. This is regular pattern matching, right? Like
yes.
you have to. There's no notion of failure there. You need to provide a complete pattern.
Yeah, yes. You're given a constructor, and there is a higher level function that gives you a pattern, a constructor, and tells you whether it matches, and then you do whatever you want with that. Yeah, or Metacoq or MTAC2 or for people to live in harmony.
Okay. Alors, other question, can I do RET generic programming? I assume so. Can I do custom printing of custom values?
Not yet, but easy to do.
Okay. And my main question was, do we need still to have plugins if we have all of this?
My answer would be most of the time no.
Tech2 is a plugin.
Yes, but that's a bootstrap plugin.
Okay, and then I had a few questions about syntax and semantics. So knowing that we are going to want like many features for this language,
yep,
and it looks close to a camel, like we discussed, like why wouldn't be the syntax of a camel maybe option to revise syntax? Like why invent a new syntax if we can reuse an existing one?
We are reusing an existing one, no?
No, LTAC is not an existing syntax. It's disqualified.
It has a syntax.
It's okay. It's one extra syntax compared with what you will choose between coq and camel. You already have.
You have to have the viewpoint that our users don't know camel. They might know just coq, and we get more and more users like this that don't know programming but that know coq.
Right. So what I'm suggesting is either you have a syntax that is mostly coq style or mostly camel style, but trying to invent a new syntax, it's not needed. I think. Just
why do you say LTAC syntax doesn't exist?
No, the syntax that is provided by LTAC when you actually want to do non-trivial things is not a good syntax.
Okay, if you're talking about tactic notations, then you're.
No.
What do you mean?
When you have to
like
write.
The let, the fun, that's pretty close to camel.
Which part of LTAC are you complaining about actually? That's the true question. Like magical is very ugly. That I agree.
So, let's not talk about syntax. I just want to say that.
Oh, come on!
I just want to say that there is some discussion, and you should just not like say this is a syntax for it. It needs to be discussed.
No, so there is a real problem there, which is that there is a re-engineering of the typing. So, and that's something so backend reusing the backend of a camel is rather easy. But reusing the front end is way harder, and that's something that would be very nice because we would get all the type system of a camel for free. But I have no idea.
I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that. I'm just asking that there is something interesting to say about the syntax, and I'd be happy to discuss it one day with you before it's completely.
If you're worried, Jason Gross explicitly told at some point on GitHub that oh, that's so nice. I took my LTAC to code. And I was able to translate it directly to a camel by just changing a few bells and whistles.
But if you put n for match in LTAC, you can translate it to a camel.
I'll take this as a very good remark that the syntax of a camel is crappy on that point. I definitely agree.
Yeah, but that's a detail. It's fine. So one thing I would like to be able to do at some point is to take some decision procedures or data structures that exist in camel files, and like take them with minimal changes or like manageable changes and integrate that in my tactics.
So you mean being able to read files?
To copy paste and adapt by hand some existing camel.
That should be.
And if you compile them, you have no camel tactic. Right? That's what you're meaning now? No.
I'd like to be able to embed in my .v file some.
So that's easy. Because they mostly the primitive mostly reuse the same types as the camel runtime.
Yep.
So you can just register. You compile this as an ML file and register a hook, well, a name for this, and you can.
An FFI.
Yeah, there is an FFI.
Okay.
Yeah, all the primitive things are written in this this FFI. So contrary to LTAC one, there is no special status for anything.
So moving on to semantics. So I think the semantics should be like quite standard. You have all the quotation and anti-quotation, I understand. what about these questions? So if you build terms, when is it checked that variables are well bound?
So,
When do you do this dynamically, and when? When do you type check terms, and when do you do type class resolution?
so all the notations type check. So these things are this check, for instance, is done at type checking. So the true question is, when do we do type checking?
Okay.
And the answer is like probably too often, but it's a very hard thing to do without a proper type system to reduce the amount of type checking that I do. So I could probably try to have some kind of caching strategy or something, knowing that something is still valid in that environment or this kind of stuff.
You're saying, without saying it, that you're doing dynamic checking.
So yes.
So if I'm building a term by adding some for to the head of some term, will I type check it entirely every time I add some for?
Yes, but the good news is that you can, if you go on the unsafe world, you can do that for free, like without any type checking. But you have to be wary of what you're doing. But the default thing is overly cautious.
Yeah, I just worry that you have this quadratic build systematically when you're building terms.
Yeah, but then if you do this kind of stuff, then you have to unplug or provide some kind of safe interface that is slightly lower level. But it's very hard to come up with something that is at the same time safe and
I understand. And type class resolution, it's just guided by type checking, or because as you introduce evars when you're building your terms, they get resolved at some point.
Yes.
And when do they get resolved?
Currently, there are two scopes for that. There is the conster and open conster. But I think that the most generic solution would be to provide an access to the glob conster as some kind of black box. So you pass a term in the quotation, you get an untyped term, and you are given all the flags for the typer and do whatever you want.
So I can decide when to do it.
Yes.
Okay. Good.
I mean that really some kind of, you think of LTAC2 as some kind of thin layer on top of a camel implementation with a good API and a more a slightly easier way of building terms because you've got quotations.
So okay, so I think that answers my question. Just so you talked about like linking with the OCaml code so you get efficient code.
Yep.
I understand. I'd like to stress the interest of having the possibility to interpret the code.
Yep.
Because you can do easily like lots of debugging.
Yeah, there are backlashes already.
Yeah, the interpreter, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
And but you didn't go as far as implementing like support for debugging.
There is no debugger, but the main problem is not a problem of LTAC2, it's a problem of cock. It's I don't know how to insert in the STM to have an interactive way of so you've got this thing that lives outside of a state because it's not marshallable necessarily.
But debugger.
Even the LTAC debugger has the same issue.
That can be done, yeah.
So my question is also how do you integrate it? Who's going to do it? And how do you share maximally between proof general, cook ID, and whatever?
The third bullet is not my problem. That one, I don't know if people start having any kind of interest into having
helping.
Yeah.
But the main problem to onboard this effort for people like me is that I don't know what the roadmap is roughly. And I'm not saying roadmap is like release that date, but like what is the next big step?
So a proper release, but actually I think it's mostly doable. I could release the current repo as just a 0.1, get a few.
You don't have 8.7 version primarily?
No, I was asked by Jason to provide this.
Because I could put it in this scope.
I really need to have a look at the whether
you need help on an implementation task.
What would I need?
I have
tooling. I need debugging. I need a lot of eyes to spot them.
I have a tricky question, and you don't need to answer because maybe it's not. But the static in term.
Yep.
Yeah. So what's the plan for that? Like.
It's critical to LTAC2.
It's critical for that too.
Yes.
But how do you hook? Are you using the infrastructure for LTAC?
Yes. So it has the same bugs.
I see. So yeah, this is so it's critical for LTAC too because okay.
So as long it will work as long as you don't use abstract in a tactic in serve. Essentially, that's the main bug that we have today. And this is solved writing the pretyper in the monad.
Well, this is all. Well, first thing you need to do is to open the pretyper, really not the pretyper, even the interpretation, if you want to support that more generically.
Yes.
But I'm questioning. But this feature is a bit. Has many problems even for user interfaces. You know what I mean?
No,
This kind of quotations. I don't know.
What's your concern?
Well, for instance, it's a very even the parsers. I don't mean it's possible. I don't mean like the way it's implemented. Like there are very few needs and needs here. For instance, this proof mode. Then when you enter a tactic inter, you need to activate the proof mode, whatever it is.
No.
Yes. Otherwise, the parser you cannot parse tactics.
No.
Yes.
No.
Otherwise, yes.
No. No. Again, no. There is an entry in the constructor grammar that is just pointing to the thing. There is no point in actually.
Yes, it has to be activated. This is what I mean.
I'm
But this is
afraid not.
an entry set by the plugins.
No, really, it has nothing to do. It's static. You're static.
So if you don't load all tag, what happens with tactic in term?
If you don't play alt tag, then you don't parse tactic in terms.
Yeah, what happens? But this is my point.
What do you mean?
This is what I'm referring to. Okay, we talk more about.
But
I just
no, if you don't. So anyway, LTAC 1 is loaded by LTAC 2 because it relies on a few things that you have. There is a backward compatible layer that allows you blah blah blah. So anyway, LTAC 1 is loaded by LTAC 2.
Isn't that one of the next tasks to do? Or get rid of this dependency?
Oh, it's easy, but then the problem is that I would need to provide a compatibility layer in another a distinct plugin or something. I mean.
I just mean with the way tactics intern are hooked now, I think it worries me. So when you say it's critical, so maybe we should try to work a bit on clean that up, and then we can settle down.
You can complain about the fact that the interpretation depends on the hook. That would be fair, but I don't see the problem is parsing. Parsing is okay.
Oh well, the parsing is, for instance, I don't have a stable AST. I have an open AST, so this is a bit of a pain for user interface.
We want to have dynamic data types to be extensible. I'm not going to repeat that like every time. Yeah, I'm not going to do that again, but like get along with it. Like at some point, we have to open data types, and that's life, because that's what we want.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Please. That's time
to. I'd like to give this demo. It's not going to be in CockPL. It's not going to attempt CockPL. I'm also giving this demo tomorrow in Charguéraud in case you are there. And it is about another way to meta program Cock. Okay. And in this time, I don't take I don't meta program Cock in Cock or Cock in OCaml. I take a different approach. I pick a very, 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 very high level language. Okay. Maybe too high level. No. Assembler. No, high level. So, and it's is a dialect of lambda products. So you're doing higher order abstract syntax. So you're using the binders of your programming language to model the ones of Cock, of Galena. And you're also using the unification variable or programming language to model the ones of Cock, the evils of Cock. We start with write comments and tactics. Okay, I'm mostly interested in comments. But okay. So, well, the first example is that I call an API. So there is an FFI as any extension language. And you give the name of a thing and you get the answer. So NAT here has been assigned to an inductive type, and this is a short print for Cock any data types NAT. Okay, so it's, this is how I represent the inductive type of natural numbers. Imagine that I want to write to build a term that is for all x of type NAT, 0 is smaller than x. I could locate all the things and then put them together like that. So this is a sort of a string with no meaning. It's just a pretty printing hint. That is what we have in the terms today of Cock. It's just the name of a bound variable. This is NAT, and this is the way you write an abstraction in this language. So this is the lambda of lambda product. So here I'm applying less or equal to 0 and then x. Okay. A bit verbose and horribles. So of course you are not going to write all your terms this way. You have a system of quotations. But you can use the syntax of Cock to write terms, and this is unfolded for you into their representation as lambda prolog syntax trees. Okay, so it's the same term as before, but big. And of course, you have anti-quotations, so for example, that lets you The important thing is that lets you build terms in steps. So for example, here I build everything but for this part. And here the anti-quotation says, go back to lambda prolog, the variable z, and z is actually assigned here. So I'm building again the same term in 2 steps.
Isn't that a grammar conflict? The fact they use column.
Oh,
It's like exactly what you do for. You can also use something bigger, but for atoms, it's.
No, but that's cock. That's cock syntax. It looks like a cast.
No, it's like term, tac, column z.
Ouais, faut mettre des parenthèses.
Yeah, but you have to put. Yeah, this is there's a.
Deux points parenthèses.
Anyway, if there is a conflict in the grammar, we will fix it.
Yeah,
It's
right.
not a big deal. So you can of course query the environment, and here we find the body of the addition. So it's a fixed point, and then we are going to call this function add. Recursive on the first argument. This is the type, not. This is lambda f for the fixed point, and then you have the lambdas. You match on the first guy. This is the return type. It's not very relevant. In the first branch, you return the second argument. Otherwise, you name the predecessor. This is really the terms of class.
So as you show a fixed point, Enrico. So that's the lambda prolog conversion is a subset of coq conversion?
No. Conversion is lambda prolog has an equality that corresponds to me to the syntax equality of terms. Okay. Convertibility will be an ad hoc predicate.
Okay.
That does rewriting according to fixed point unfolding, whatever.
Yeah, but lambda prolog equality is going to take beta at least into account on the lambda prolog level, right? Okay.
That's true. So this is for a constant, a global constant. For an inductive type, when you query in the environment, you get more stuff, and we are going to use it quickly soon. For example, you get the sort, the number of parameters, you get the name of the constructors and their types as lists, okay? So now we are building quickly a comparison function, a Boolean test for equality on these types. Well, I'll take natural numbers because it's easy, but then you will see that. So up to that point, I was making queries. Of course, there is a standard entry point called main. Here I take an argument that is a string. I locate it so that I get inductive type. I also craft a name for the comparison function, and I registered it in the environment, like defining it. And of course, I'm going to focus on this derive EQ that, given the inductive type, it gives me the comparison function. So what do? This is the inductive type, as this is the comparison function. Well, for now, I say that the comparison function will be a fixed f over 2 terms of type t, where t is the lambda problem, the type I'm interested in. It will go by recursion on the first one. This is the return type, tier bool. And then the body, for now, I call it bo. And you should read this in lambda problem as bo can depend on f, n, and m. And for now, bo is just true, okay? We will do it step by step. So I call the thing, and I have my nuts in P1. And, well, that's the term with true here, okay? Now we are going to refine and go to something more interesting. This time we are going, for the body, we want to pattern match on the first element. And I don't have a nice quotation for match for various reasons, okay? So I have a library function that lets me build a match given the element you want, the term you want to pattern match on, its type. Tell me how to build the return type of the match, that in this case would be always bool. Another relation that is used to derive all the branches, okay? And in this case, this relation we receive the constructor, the variables to which it is applied, and their types, and I say true everywhere. Okay? So this time, we are in this situation. We matched on the first guy, and we did true on both branches. Now let's refine even more our example. So as before, I will build a match on n, and in the relation that is called on each branch, I will build another match on the second guy. So I pass to this relation the second guy and its type. So this time here, I'm going to build a match on the second guy with the type, bool. And of course, I call a new function that is the new relation, derive EQ body, that will take everything that is known about the first constructor, and will also receive everything that is known about the second one. So in this case, if the two constructors are the same, I write true, otherwise I write false. So it's still not correct, but getting closer. Okay. So now what we need to do to fix our definition, that we should do something about these two guys. Okay. Imagine that this inductive type had an argument of type bool there. Okay. Probably we would have generated beforehand a comparison function for bool. So we need to have a database with all these functions. And also, if the argument happens to be of the same type we're building a comparison function for, we have to load in this database temporarily f. So this is the type of the database. It relates two terms, the type and the function. When we go under the fixed point, we augment the database with an entry for the type and the f, that is the fixed point we are creating. And then we do something more relevant when we are in the leaves. So if the constructor is the same, we say true. And it has no arguments, we say true. If the constructor is the same, it is applied to x, y of type t. When we say the conjunction between the comparison between x and y and something else, the comparison of the other arguments. So the comparison for x and y, we first fetch a function to compare them according to their types. And then we build the application of this function to x and y. And then this is just a recursive call on the lists, on the tails of the list of arguments.
Yes, but term equality is taking the term unification is taking into account universes. Just wondering.
In this case, it's syntactic. So no, if you want to do a lookup up to universes, whatever, you have to do.
So it's really conster ek. Like
yeah.
Really, okay.
Yeah, you should think about that this way.
The difference between bow and body.
Because bow is not finished, body is really the one that builds the leaves. Okay, it's an intermediary one, and I didn't want to call it B1, B2. So I said bow body. Maybe it was not a good choice. So anyway, this is the function, and I guess we agree it's not perfect because, for example, we could have a special case for a unitary list, for a singleton list, not to put it and through there. And if the inductive type has parameters, maybe here we should, before starting the fix, we should take an input. But I see that we are not so far from something usable. So I experimented it with that. For example, I have similar code to that to generate equality tests. And if you use it on list, you see that you take an input also the comparison for the elements of the list. I have one that generates maps for containers. Then Cyril Cohen wrote in about a week, maybe 10 days, a parametricity plugin, a parametricity translation. So for example, for lists, this is the unary one. So if you have a proposition over alpha, it gives you a proposition over list of alpha. This is the unary parametricity translation. This is exactly the for all thing you were presenting. Okay. And for example, you can call the map, derive.map on this parametricity translation. And what you get is that if you have two properties, P1 and P2, one implies the other, then the first lifted to the lists implies the second one lifted to the list, so it's sort of functoriality. Anyway.
In code for the comparison functions, do you generate proofs that they are correct?
It's work in progress. So this is, for example, the fact that I need this thing is because I needed to do it in a modular way. But actually, during the summer, an intern did it. So he wrote the code for both the comparison test and the proofs, but he did it in a very non-modular way, aligning the fixed points of all the... If you have a data type like the tree, and the constructor takes a list of trees, the induction principle of Koch is not sufficient to prove correct your equality test, so it was aligning everything. So the code is still there in Attic, it compiles, but I wanted to do it in a more clean way, so I don't have it yet, but all these parts, for example, are pieces that I need. And that's enough for comments. And the API is reasonably stable. I mean, you have many of the things you may need. You can also write tags. At the beginning, I didn't want to do that, but then Cyril asked me, so I started giving you the possibility to program tags. So this time, the entry point is called solve and not main. And you get a goal, you get its context, presenting the goal, okay, that you may want to assign in order to proceed in the proof, and the type. Okay, and then other stuff that we will see in a minute. So, for example, you can print here you can print the current context is a list of declarations. The first one is called, the bound variable is called the x0, the lambda prolog bound variable, but the name given by the user is x, and it is of type nat. You have the whole list. And this is the EVAR you may want to instantiate that sees the 4 guys that are in the context plus 5 or whatever.
So in the semantics of this language, you've got the global EVAR state that is going on, I guess. So you also, the equality between, what is the relationship between the unification of lambda prolog, coq?
Something that, well, I will come to that in a second. Okay. I wanted the language to be reasonably safe, so things are wired up in a way that, for example, here I have 2 clauses for solve, and I try blindly to assign to the EVAR true here and 3 there. Okay, and when you try that, it works, and the proof is the second one. Why? Because on each EVAR there is a suspended constraint, a type checking constraint. There is a program written in lambda prolog that performs type checking, actually elaboration. So as soon as the term materializes, okay, the type checking predicates continues to type check the thing. Imagine that here, instead of saying 3 plus a fresh variable, okay, so now my tactic doesn't close the goal, but even so show proof, it generated the term, and there is a type checking constraint attached to this other variable that coq reads back as a goal. Okay, this is very low level. This is not how I think you should program any tactic, but this is just to give you an idea of what happens.
What is the context of that EVAR? Is the one of the goal?
I will show you in a minute.
So if you do that under context, so for instance, say that you instantiate, that instead of 3 you're putting, because there you're going to get something that's not very interesting.
Sorry, I will do it here so that you see it better. I'm tracing from step 0 to step 1, not very interesting, but this is what is run actually in the lambda prolog interpreter. So there are 2 goals. It's a conjunction between 2 goals. The first one, under a context made of decl and def, if you have Latins, for x, y, z, and h, you declare an EVAR. So it's and this actually calls the type checker that suspends because the term is not there. Okay? So there is a syntactic constraint suspended on this goal, and then this is the main goal. Okay? So the entry point we saw, goal with the context. So the meta variable x2 here, x2 is applied to bound names. Okay? The meaning of the bound names are given by this context, this list that tells them what.
And at the end, you actually instantiate this free variable by, there is an oracle that generates the EVARs. You need the EVAR in the evaluation, right, at some point. Like the x2 you've got there.
I think I can answer to you, but I need more time, so I want to finish the demo if still 2 minutes.
Yeah, you have 2 more minutes.
And then I can answer this question, but it's I need to unravel more details that I don't want to do now. Okay. So, for example, intro is a tactic that takes a string and then refines, where refine is using the elaborator written in lambda prolog with this lambda term. Okay. And actually here the API says, okay, this is the goal in input, and these are the new goals. Okay, and refine fills the list with what is left. Now we have our little intro tactic, just to give you an idea of what anything. Okay, magic. Huh? Okay, that's not rocket science. Now let's write a stupid automation in that. It's a prolog-like language, so you have backtracking, and this is probably the kind of tactics you want to do. Then control the backtracking with bang, caches, whatever. So in my portfolio of tactics, I have intro that I just wrote. I have expulso. So I look at the context. This is a list combinator. I check if there exists in the context a variable v for which the type is exactly false. So here I'm not using unification or conversion. This is syntactic equality. And in this case, I refine the goal saying, okay, it's a match on an empty type. There is constructor that says, well, I I check the goal, and it is an inductive type applied, and I look in the environment, the constructors and their types, and I ask myself if there exists a constructor such that once I apply it to enough arguments, looking at the type, saturate takes the type, and if there are products, it pads the other argument with enough holes. Sorry, I didn't say. This hole is really the underscore of cock. The implicit argument. This is the constructor. Then there is any. You will try all the tactics in a list. It's a tactical. And repeat is not in this file, but okay, imagine what it does. And here, you remember this is the list of new goals, so I say it's 0. Okay, so the system will try to find a way to repeatedly until there are no more goals left. And just to show that this is really thanks to backtracking that you have to think, but at least you have it. If I do something like that, so I'm not imposing that the goals are solved, the system will pick a solution, and the first one is to prove this disjunction to go left, okay? And so it will leave me with this subgoal unsolved, okay? Because repeats cannot. Stops when it cannot proceed, okay? And of course, if I put the empty list, now I'm asserting that it should be solved, so it will take another path. But for example, I may want to control my backtracking and put a bank here saying, okay, we cut the search, and in this case, the system will not be able to find a solution with a readable error message. And that's all.
Oh, by the way, how to fix this bug of errors in the text?
Emilio.
Okay, end of parenthesis.
So, okay, the part about tactics, I have to admit it's experimental. I'm not very, I don't think I ironed out all the problems. The part about metaprogramming to generate terms, like in Derive, I think is pretty stable.
Okay. It's funny because I don't know about other developers, but initially I thought L type 2 was a replacement project to write tactics. You were working on some metaprogramming stuff, and I realized in your talk, that in previous talks, that you were also doing some metaprogramming, and I realized that you also was writing tactics. So the picture I had in there was...
The plan, at least my plan at the beginning, was completely different. What I was interested in is rewriting the elaborator of Coq, and I have an elaborator, it's not finished, and I'm using it in the tactic part, so this is why it's not stable. That was my objective. Then it seems that the thing could be useful also to do other stuff like this. So there it is.
Ok. Merci pour la démo. Et bonne soirée à tout le monde.
Let's see.
We close here for today?
You start the technical session?
Very technical session. We're never going to make it.
We can have a question.
Oh no, we postponed it.
What?
One of my authors couldn't come. So